Hi, everybody. This is Jim from the Pain PT. Good to see everybody today. I know everybody loves success stories, so I'm really happy to bring this one today. I got Haleigh on the line. Haleigh, how you doing?
I'm good, thank you.
That's awesome. We were just chatting off air for a couple of minutes. I said, I can't remember the last time I saw you, and we looked it up, and it's been almost 2 years. So I'm really interested to hear the story and how you got to where you are today. So I'm just going to turn it over to you, and you can share your story.
Cool. Okay, great. Thank you. Yeah, I think 2 years is about double the amount of time I thought it's been. I guess that's a good thing though. Time flies when you're moving forward, I guess, which is how what I have felt has been happening for me the last 2 years. But yeah, my where do I even begin? I started talking to you when I was, yeah, dealing with actually coming out of a foot injury, but it was combined with chronic back pain. So I was kind of making my way, trying to sift my way through all of that and what was possibly mind body, what was physical, what was not, and really trying to find my way, yeah, through that. And that's when I found you. I think I found you maybe on a podcast. I honestly don't fully remember. But my me in a nutshell is up until I'd say about 6 months ago, I really dealt with, yeah, chronic back pain, and other symptoms. I dealt with injuries in the past that turned chronic, from actual physical injuries, through mountain biking, things like that, but definitely lingered longer than they needed to. And a pretty severe foot injury that we can dive a little bit deeper into because I'm sure there's a lot of people that have been through a similar journey with medical professionals and surgeries and everything that really created this extremely fear-based and hyper vigilant, hyper aware relationship with my body. And that prolonged, now I know now that prolonged the symptoms and what could have maybe healed. I don't want to say normally, but in a more, how your body's actually supposed to heal was prolonged and turned chronic. So when I start speaking to you is really to work my way through that. Um, and yeah, and I want to speak to you today because I feel like I'm actually on the other side now, and these interviews are really what helped me in the past. So I'm unbelievably grateful to be able to share my story now.
Yeah,
So
I'm grateful for you coming on because not everybody's willing to share their story, but it's super powerful. So yeah, maybe take us back to
mhm.
some of these things that you dealt with and how they started and what
Yeah.
manifested.
Yeah, so I think honestly, if I really want to take it, I started to write notes before this call, and I'm like, I'm just gonna talk because I haven't spoken my whole story in a while, but I know it like the back of my hand because I mean, it is still fairly recently. Um, looking back, I have always had a very, very anxious, very hyper aware personality. Very, always very, very aware of my body, how it looks, how it feels, all of that from a very young age. I don't remember, and all of this ties into, what we know about mind body symptoms and being hyper aware of our bodies to where it becomes an obsession, et cetera, et cetera. So, kind of giving a backstory to my personality and why it all ends up adding up in my story and for many other people's stories. So I always had this personality of being very anxious, very hyper aware of myself, my surroundings, everything like that. Due to some difficulties, some traumatic things that happened during my teenage years, I really turned to physical activity, specifically cycling and mountain biking and traveling to do those things to give me a sense of self and to make me feel in control. And I had my first injury when I was maybe 20 years old. And it was just a strained kind of inner knee, somewhere around the meniscus, that soft tissue in there injury. And it put me off the bike for a whole summer. And I mention this not because it seems kind of random, but I mention this because this was the first time where my body didn't act the way I expected it to, and I freaked out. I went into overdrive figuring it out. I went to every single PT I could go to. I was just in complete kind of disassociation, with myself and not knowing what was going on and not knowing how to handle it at that age and that time in my life. And that started a relationship with being injured that I would have that relationship with being injured or not having my body feel perfect for the next, 5 years. So this kind of started a cascade of just how I interpreted what I felt in my body. After that, I started to feel kind of random things like inflammation in my ankle, inflammation in my wrist, almost like arthritis almost. There was at one point, I was wearing a wrist brace all the time. I was taping both of my knees. I got
And these type
PRP.
of things, these were like non-injury type symptoms that
No,
started.
they were, in the past I had maybe sprained that wrist, or something like that, but it was not, oh, I sprained that wrist and it's the 6 weeks, you need to ice it and rest it. It was
Right.
just like, oh, I'm typing on my phone and oh, my wrist kind of feels funny. Oh, maybe I can't ride my bike now tomorrow. So I've got to, just this like the it wasn't what am I trying to say? What am I there's a saying, there's a way to say this, I'm blanking, but it wasn't equal. It didn't make sense. It
Yeah,
wasn't logical.
it didn't make sense. It wasn't adding up.
It wasn't adding up. So it was all this just trying to be, preventative and fix something if it's there. Um, anyway, and so that led me to even get like PRP, um, and that's platelet. I'm forgetting what it means, platelet rich plasma, right? It's where they
Yeah,
take
the
the
plasma.
plasma from your blood and shoot it back into your joints. Because I was just so worried, and so I can't feel this, and I didn't want to give it time. I didn't want to just be at peace with things can hurt a little bit. It's okay. And so I just went through all these different avenues. Um, got PRP in my knee and my ankle. And this was all just from it not feeling the way my body not feeling the way I thought it needed to feel or it should feel. Um, so it sent me down that cascade. I guess the next thing that happened that I have to mention just to kind of explain to everyone my buildup. I tripped on, it was one summer. I was living in Oregon at the time. Body was feeling okay, nothing at this point, nothing crazy. This was probably about 2 years after my first knee injury and kind of putting out all these little fires I was creating in my head. But I was in a pretty good place. It was 2020 at the time. COVID had just hit. I was living in Oregon. Long story short, I tripped on a stair and broke my foot. And I automatically, if you've broken a bone, you kind of know when you break a bone, you know the difference. I went to a podiatrist, a surgical podiatrist. They took an x-ray. They're like, yep, you fractured your fifth metatarsal, wear a boot for 6 to 8 weeks. You'll be okay, no worries. So I did that. Had like 4 follow-up x-rays. I've made the mistake in the past of not doing that follow-up. They told me it was healed, but all summer it kept giving me issues. I couldn't get back to ride my bike. I couldn't go on runs. At this point, I had a really great chiropractor body work person who really was close to me. He recommended getting an MRI, and come to find out it was a non-union. So it never fully, there was like scar tissue in there, but it never fully healed. So I went to, it was 3 or 4 different surgeons in Bend, Oregon, and I mentioned that just because it's a city with amazing athletes that get surgery all the time. Like if you're going to get surgery, it's not a bad place to do it. Um, and they all said I needed to get a screw put in that foot. So I did. That caused me to get a surgery and have to move back home. And again, I mention all this because it's the nervous system piece. It's just everything getting, rising, then your nervous system. So I moved back home after this, go through the rehab. 4 months later, it hurts more than ever.
Mm.
So I go to more surgeons in Austin, Texas. I get 3 other opinions, and I hear all these things like the screw was too big, it's not tight enough, never should have done that, it needs to come out right now, et cetera, et cetera. So after a few weeks of trying to decide, I decided to get it taken out. Thankfully, I did because that was definitely the right decision. But that started even more of a sense of hypervigilance and being worried about my body. Who can I trust? What's true? Et cetera, et cetera. And all the while, I have this chronic back pain going on. So
Mm.
it's hard to distinguish between. So this is a real physical injury, right? I really did injure my foot. I really am having surgery. But my back, I don't know about my back. So I had these
The
two
back
kind
started
of,
to come in later. The back pain
yeah,
started
yeah, yeah.
later. Yeah.
The back came in. Well, see, what's interesting is though the back came in my timelines. I need to be a little clear about my timeline. My back started coming in and out, to be totally honest, probably a couple of years prior to breaking, or like a year prior to breaking the foot. That truly started coming in, looking back now, as a like nervous system like response. It just kind of came in randomly. I'd feel it sometimes, I wouldn't, but it was when I started dealing with the foot that it was consistent.
Hmm.
And I think that's something I realized is like it stayed when I was the most dysregulated, I guess, when I didn't feel I had any of my coping mechanisms anymore. Um, so long story short, the foot was a whole thing. And that's also when I started talking to you. And I remember talking to you, I think I remember talking to you about kind of how to separate those two for myself. You know, one is real, one does need is physical and needs time to heal, and but your back pain is a whole different, that can be a whole different issue. So I say all of that just to create the picture of just the relationship I was having with my body. There were some physical things actually happening, but all the while my nervous system was completely off the charts. I was hyper aware, hyper anxious, and that ultimately I know now is what was causing the back pain. So
Yeah. The hyper anxiousness? What were you having? A lot of catastrophic thoughts. What was running through your mind? What were you having?
it was, I wrote some of them down. It was, just fear, 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 fear is the huge one. Fear that it wouldn't go away, fear that I was wrong, fear that all these other success stories I'd heard about people's back pain getting better, et cetera, it wouldn't be my case, or maybe it would get 80% better, but not 100%. So I still wouldn't feel like myself. It was just every catastrophe, everything you could imagine. And I felt very like trapped within my own body, and to the point where, and this will go into more into where I'm at in life now, but just where you didn't even want to like stand up. You don't want to be with yourself because you're just so disconnected from how you felt. So yeah, a lot of catastrophizing, a lot of fear, um, and just not knowing what the problem was, and having had so much different input at this point about what was going on in my body in general.
Yeah,
So
a lot of confusion, right? Different answers. That's not going to help you, right? Your brain settle down or your brain get quiet. Your brain's going to
right,
get more anxious.
right, exactly, exactly. So at this point, I one of the best things, and help me not get too off track, but at this point this was in 2021. At this point now, I was going to resolving the foot, getting over that physically, while also kind of resolving my back pain as well. And thankfully, between learning about the mind body connection, my PT at the time for my foot introduced me at the beginning of the spring of 2021, to kind of keep me on track timeline wise. He was helping me with my foot and my back pain. And thankfully, I'm so grateful. He was very functional. He was very holistic in his approach. He wasn't one of those PTs that gave you 20 different things with three different bands and, said, do this an hour a day and you'll be fine. He was very hands-on in the sense that he did his work with you and then gave you two exercises and really talked to you about things. And one of the things he introduced me to was the book by, isn't it David Butler, Explain Pain?
Pain. Yeah. David Butler and Lorimer Mosley.
Yeah. And that book changed my life. To this day, if anybody is ever dealing with pain, it's like that's like the best gift. That's the best investment. One of the best investments I think to do for yourself, for somebody you love that's maybe going through this, because the way they explain pain, um, literally explain pain,
Yeah.
is it's just incredible. It blew my mind. And they have that, and they have the workbook that went along with it, and I did both things, and that flipped a switch. So that's the first thing I did, to start learning about what pain actually is, and that gave me hope. That gave me a lot of hope and put me at least more in the back. I went from the back seat to at least the passenger seat, and to eventually the driver's seat, of what I was feeling.
Good way to say it. Yeah, that explaining pain book is pretty cool.
Uh-huh.
As an aside, that's what got me into this when I was studying in Australia. That book was coming out, and I got to take some training from David Butler and Lorimer Moseley, and that was cutting edge at the time. It still is, and it's just kind of like blows your mind in terms of the brain, right, and the nerve endings and how things work. And that's not just your body. So
No, and how well they, just to prop them up even more, I guess, in the work you do, how you don't feel like a lot of the work you do isn't just, it's not just it's a lot of it's teaching. You really teach also what pain is and what's going on, not just therapy or not just counseling, whatever you'd classify it as. And that's what they do so beautifully in that book, is it makes this actually very complex thing extremely you can really absorb it and take it on for yourself.
adjustable. So having that right type of PT, I think was very helpful for you.
Yeah, extremely. And that I went from that to that book to, he recommended me to some really amazing body work. They're kind of a mix between PTs and trainers, just to help me safely I don't want to say safely, because that implies like movement isn't safe, but just in a confident progressive way build up my activity again through, I mean, through the foot, which was a legitimate physical injury. And what was so beautiful is they and I say this to explain just the type of support that helped me, and what I would suggest and anybody else kind of advocate for themselves for going through this. Like, don't settle for support that's not like this. Maybe if you can, if you have that option. But the people I worked with, in a very loving, supportive way, when I would want to kind of get in my head and go, oh no, I can't do that, it'll hurt my back, they're like, okay, well, maybe we don't do that today, but we're going to do this instead. Okay, we're not going to fix your pain today, but we're going to get you stronger today in this way. And just that constructive, okay, yeah, maybe you're not going to do that today, but you're going to do this instead. And just that total not dismissing, but just forward, just creative,
Yeah, redirecting you into doing some goal activity, which is really
and,
what we want to do. We want to get your attention off the pain anyway, because it's not something you're going to be able to fix chronic pain anyway.
and just this idea, and just really and I guess circling back to what helped me is, it's like in my experiences, just creating also a different relationship with what you are feeling. You don't want to ignore sensations, but what helped me and what plays a role in my story, what I'm trying to share, is one of the steps I went through is creating a different relationship with the possibly unpleasant sensation I was having. It's like, once we establish it's not dangerous, well, then just making peace with feeling that in the midst of still doing movement. It's just so layered. And going through those, it really is like, I mean, it's building blocks that you work your way up or through, however you want to say that. Um, so I guess kind of trying to circle back, that's what helped me, is like progressively building up my movement with a team, with someone that was supportive, but also, you know, didn't let me give in to the fear. And I was extremely, extremely fortunate, to have found that. And whether you have that support or not, you can still, you're fully capable of doing that for yourself. Maybe going on a run feels too anxiety inducing today, but you can do some breathing exercises, or you can do something, and really kind of humbling yourself to do that.
And during that
Um,
time, just probably good to let the audience know,
yeah.
as you're going through the PT and doing these things, you were having pain still, right? You were having
Oh God, yeah.
effort all over in your back and your foot.
Oh yeah. I mean, the foot, thankfully at this point, was more of a more of a soreness, more of just an achiness sometimes. But I definitely was still feeling the foot, and it definitely still gave me fear. It definitely was still a thing. And then yeah, my back, no, my back, I was, like, I built up finally to front squatting, not nothing crazy, but doing full on, with a barbell and weight. And I would still, not every day, but every few days or something, I would still feel it in my back. And I would still want, to stick that trigger point ball in my back and roll it out after, and I say that in the sense that, like, I'd still feel like there was something to fix. I would still feel like, oh, I need to do something about what I'm feeling. But what's so cool is when you learn that, like, and so this maybe segues well into one of the other points I definitely wanted to make. Um, it teaches you that, like, you can be moving forward without it being perfect. And like, I know that sounds very cliche and like, kind of a, duh thing to say, but it's like you can be getting stronger and you can be getting better and not necessarily feel perfect. Again, it's that relationship of, but I'm not in danger. Like there's nothing wrong. But it takes time to get there. It takes a level of discernment and like wisdom that you only get from going through this process.
Correct, correct. And like you said, the process wasn't quick.
Oh God, no. I mean,
It wasn't a long process.
I talked to you 2 years ago. I didn't even realize that. I thought it was a year ago. So no, it's just, um, it's extremely humbling and extremely rewarding and extremely difficult the whole way through. But it's going to be all three of those things all the time, you
Yeah,
know?
it's a good way to put it. And I think, that's the stories you're telling it to audience. People want a quick fix. And I know that can happen for some people, but a lot of people muddle their way through it, struggle their way through it like you did. Just keep going,
Mhm.
keep learning, right? You were redirecting your attention away from the pain onto functional activities, getting back. Therapist definitely held you, right? Create safety in you. You were learning stuff too. So yeah,
Yeah.
things were starting to be in motion then.
Yeah, definitely. There was constant forward momentum, whether you going through this process, realize it or not. It's that classic picture of, the squiggly lines and eventually pops out, ahead or a forward. Um, but no, I lost my train of thought. But no, it's very much a process. And I think you the biggest thing I had to let go of is, yeah, that perfectionism and the sense that, oh, I know what I was going to say. Sorry, had a brain. I lost my train of thought. One of the things I also want to make a point to say, and it ties into working with trainers and um, working with the physical, physically moving forward and gaining confidence while also addressing the mental, emotional, mind body side of it. One of the things I had to learn, I still tell myself, and that I share with anyone I've gotten to talk to about it, there is going to be, for many of us, I think there are stories, and I'm sure you've worked with people, as soon as they hear, oh, it's in my head, or it's not, it's a mind body thing. They do get better. They do, like, that switches whatever they have going on, it switches it off. Or I truly believe some people, you know, they, I do believe some people might throw their back out and they go get a massage or they go get a sling and they feel better, or doing that once a month for 5 years does keep addressing it purely physically. It can help. Like, I think that was one of the toughest things for me to wrap my head around. Someone who I'm sure many people can relate. Like, I like to fully understand and be fully logical and fully it's this or it's that, or again, that safety thing, that perfectionist thing. What I had to learn was, you know what? It might be a little bit of both. You are a lot, or 70% one and 30% the other. And one day it might be 50% one and 50% the other. It all averages out to be the same. But again, you learn so much in that, because what I learned is, it's like, look, you've got to build up your confidence in your body physically, and know though that what's controlling the volume, so to speak, on what you feel is your mind and your emotions, if that makes sense. I think that's an analogy I used a lot, is you can't necessarily fully change the channel, but you control the volume based on your thoughts and how you're regulating your emotions and your nervous system. And it's important to do some sort of movement most days. And, it's that
Right,
and
which you were
piece.
doing. How did you address the mind side of it for you personally, between the thoughts and the emotions?
Mhm. Oh gosh. A lot. So I guess I will kind of take a step back again, timeline wise. The I'm so amazingly grateful. But before I was even experiencing the physical, this kind of part of life I'm sharing, maybe 6 months to a year before that, right after I graduated college in the summer of 2017, and I probably started when I had that first injury was 2018. I mentioned with the knee, that kind of started this 5 year, more or less, up and down thing with chronic symptoms. I started working with a therapist slash coach who does she specifically does resonance repatterning therapy. It's just an alternative type of therapy and coaching where it's all about truly looking at the why and the roots of what you're feeling and what you're going through, whether it's physical, mental, and so I started looking at the roots of what I was going through that. So I guess to summarize, through therapy, through coaching, through gaining cognitive awareness for kind of why I am the way I am and the way I work. So I did that work. And then I think just through all of this, I think talking to you, I talked to a couple other coaches to help me kind of a lot of mine was, really becoming cognitively aware of my patterns and what was going on. When I felt this, what happened, or when I did this, just really connecting the dots for myself. Um, I would say just not just continuing to truly learn and continuing to listen to podcasts, continuing to listen to books, I journaled a lot. I wrote a lot in this time. And I will say, I hesitate to say this because I don't want it to, I want it to be a very, very open thing, but I will say like my belief in like my spirituality and my faith, like that did getting in touch with a bigger picture, that did help a lot. And it did shift my sense of self and sense of worth in a positive way throughout this process. To kind of see myself from, the 10th story view rather than being so in myself. And that gave me I guess, a wisdom, that I didn't have before. So that helped a lot.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good,
Oh,
good. A lot
yeah.
of things here you were doing. So, like you said, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, right? All kind of coming together. So you were doing this for a couple years, right? And you mentioned off air that it wasn't until the last, I forget how many months that things really kind of clicked in. So like maybe take the audience through what was happening as you were transitioning forward more with doing more, what was going on in your body.
Okay. So yes, I guess we can kind of not skip ahead, but skip to like, yeah, like last summer, I would say. So last summer would be that's 2023. I was working as a things were getting better. I was definitely on the come up. But I was still kind of in this like bartering with myself a little bit about what I was feeling. Like some days that I thought, oh yeah, I was still, I think we said it before we started recording, but it was still in that I think I know what's going on, not that I know what's going on. So I was making progress, but I wasn't settled in. It was kind of a still, if my body gets better, if my body gets better, not a when I'm gonna feel better, I guess, or feel more at peace. But there was forward momentum. I was exercising again. I was going on some bike rides. I was doing yoga. I had my quality of life back. I wasn't feeling pain in my foot, but it was still in the back of my head. And part of that, I know, again, getting back to the lifestyle, mental, emotional piece, is I stepped away from my job as a nutrition and health coach. I was working remotely, doing that for a couple years. I chose to step away from that. I wanted to do some traveling and just kind of just transition, go back to school in some way, shape, or form. And so that again created a big disruption for me. So last summer was really tough in my body. But long story short, I decided to, and I kind of jump ahead to this because it'll explain kind of, I think, what truly kind of put me over the edge in a positive way. Um, is I have had a passion for cooking just in the last year, combined with the nutrition health coaching, and I decided to move to New York, create a home base for myself. I had been living kind of nomadically, doing this remote job, and go to culinary school. And I moved to New York at the end of last year in November, December. And that was so nerve-wracking because, and this is how crazy the brain is and how irrational we can be. I was I knew I could do it. I knew I could do the school. I knew I could do the move. The biggest fear was I know I've been working out and I've been going on runs, but can I stand in a kitchen for 6 hours a day at school? You know, is that arthritis in my wrist that caused me to wear a brace 3 years ago going to flare up? Is my back going to hurt? It's just crazy how it was all still there, but it just like was at the front now again. And long story short though, I'm like, but you can't. It was the first time in the 5 years where I'm like, you literally can't make a decision based off of that. Like you literally just have to go, that's not a thing. And even if it is a thing, I will figure it out. So it's that you
Mm.
just kind of healthily force yourself into confidence that not that it will all be okay, but you will figure it out.
So you kind of
Um,
made what I'm hearing is you made the decision, hey, I'm going to do this goal. Whatever happens, happens. It's going to be all right. We're just going to get through it. So you kind of said it doesn't matter, right? You got
mhm,
to that place in your mind where you're like, it doesn't matter what it's doing.
exactly. And that's yeah, and that's another key point throughout the whole journey is there are moments where I had to say it doesn't matter. Something that I've said for years matters and that it has to dictate my quality of life. You kind of just have to get a healthy amount of just aggravated with it and go, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter anymore. And so this was the biggest form of that for me so far, in that journey. And sure enough, I moved. I mean, turned out to be the best thing, but I will say the first month, the schooling was 5 days a week, 5 hours a day, 4 to 6 hours a day, give or take. Standing the whole time, of course. 6 months. The first month, I remember there specifically being a week where like I didn't want to stand up straight in class. My back hurt so bad and my foot ached and my wrist hurt. I almost taped my wrist once. I'm like, nope, you're not freaking taping your wrist. Like it's
Good for
fine.
you.
Like
Good for you.
don't like you know, girl, like stop. Don't get the tape out. I think I even went and bought tape and I didn't do it. Cause I'm like, once you do that once, you're gonna like at that point I knew how my brain, it's like it doesn't make sense. You do push-ups, you've ridden your bike, like it doesn't make sense. And so at some point you kind of get sick of your own neural pathway and you're like, what are you doing? Like you don't take that turn anyway. You almost can laugh at it at some point, 4 years
Right.
later, whatever it was.
Right.
Anyway, so the first month or two, it was quite, it was rocky. I was up and down. I was trying to work out consistently. I would have back pain at the gym, just like walking on the Stairmaster for 20 minutes. Like the same pain I had 2 years ago. And I was worried.
Interesting that your foot pain, right, also acted up, even though everything was healed. You got through all the therapy, right? So all these
Mhm.
achy parts came back to life in a way.
Oh, totally. I mean, it's kind of again, once you're through it, you can look back at it and go, that it's almost cool to just see how your body just it just does its thing. Anyway, um, so that flared up, but I stayed true. I think that's the thing. I moved here with such a like purpose and such a I don't want to say goal, but just such a like it was very, very purpose driven. It was so like in a very healthy way. I'm going to prove that this doesn't matter, and I'm going to prove that if it does come, it'll come as a wave and it'll pass. And I'm going to prove to myself that I'm okay if it comes for a month and goes away. Like I'll be fine. Anyway, so I stuck with it. And by the end of schooling, I wasn't feeling my back. I wasn't feeling anything. Um,
How long was the schooling, the whole
the
program?
school, the schooling was 6 months. And and I guess to go ahead and skip to present, and I'm sure we'll kind of backtrack again. I've been working in a restaurant now for 3 months, 8 to 12 hour, 10 to 15 hour shifts. And I feel no back pain, no foot pain, no wrist pain, no nothing. Now I'm not saying I feel like I'm, 18 and have nothing, but I'm just saying like I was telling you this earlier, I don't identify with chronic pain or my back hurts today or I'm worried about my foot. If I do feel something, it's like, oh yeah, I kind of want to get a massage, or oh yeah, I probably just need to sleep and not work out today. Whatever. It's again, I hate to use the word normal, but it's
Yeah,
it's
it is.
health
It's normal. Yeah, typical things.
it's
Yeah.
health it's healthy. And so yeah, so that's where I'm at, kind of speed.
So that last push, you had all the training, the knowledge, you did a lot of work, and then maybe go into that culinary school, like
Mm,
also like in the background, that was something you, like you said, purposeful, passion, and the environment was very good, right? Very positive for you. You were
exactly.
settling in. So that in your brain also would have had an effect, I think,
Yep.
ultimately she went through the program and yeah.
I no, 100%. I think and redirect me if I get too far off what we'd like to speak about, but I think again, trying to tie it back to that mental emotional piece. I was doing something that really boosted my self-esteem, like my actual self-esteem. I felt a lot of self-esteem going through this process and showing up every day and giving it my all versus what I was physically feeling. And I think that's something that we can really forget going through pain and not feeling good in our bodies to still do things like again, sounds so simple because it is actually, but do things that we're still proud of, do things that still make us feel good about ourselves, you know? And because so much of it is we become so so disconnected, so not safe, so frankly, we just don't like being I didn't like being in my own body. And so you kind of quit pursuing those things that give you purpose and give you self-esteem because and it's very valid, but it's
Yeah,
very
that's a
important.
great point. Great point because you're basically right. People in chronic pain, chronic symptoms, they get easily into a depressed state, easily into a shame state,
Yep.
feeling bad about themselves, right? Like you said, didn't want to be in your body, getting into an anxious state. And so if
Yep.
you accomplish something and do that, it just brings you, it lifts you out of that you're worthy, right? You can do this, you can get back. And that literally shifts your emotional state and
Hmm.
shifts your body sensations and symptoms. Incredible, but that's what it does.
No, it's huge. It's huge. And it also, I think everything is like I use the analogy, it's like life's like a pie chart, and where your energy goes is a pie chart, what's in your mind's a pie chart. It's all a pie chart. And ultimately it's all one pie chart, really. And, I think pain or chronic symptoms, without us even realizing it, it becomes the majority of the pie chart. And the only way to make that sliver chunk smaller is to start crowding. I think that's the other thing, crowd it out. I use this analogy like with nutrition coaching. It's like it's not always about taking foods out, it's adding more good in. So it's like I think that's something with chronic pain and the chronic symptoms. It's like, okay, maybe we're probably not taking your pain away today. Might not even take your pain away in the next 3 years and like get okay with that. But what can you start adding in to start crowding out the effect that that has on your life because you really can. And that's the other thing I had to learn is how stubborn I was and how humbled I became. It's like, look, you might not be able to do exactly what you want to do today, but you can do this, this, and this. So do that. And so there's this tough love piece that comes eventually or at certain points too. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, so well said. I really like that, crowding it out and
Um,
finding other things, because when you're stuck in it, you're entrapped in it, right? You're just drowning in the pain, drowning in this whole syndrome. So it's the last thing you want to do is to think you could do something more, but that's actually what gets you out of this, shifting your neural networks.
and that's one of there's actually many, as annoying as it is, there's actually many positive things about going through this process, but that is one of them is how creative or how out of the box you have. And again, I say that loosely because it can have a negative connotation, but you end up getting about your time and about what you enjoy doing about what makes you you, especially if you're somebody that, I mean anybody, but especially if you're somebody that came from a past of being an athlete or loving to be active and working out or whatever it may be. Um, yeah, it's huge. It's huge.
Huge. Yeah.
So
So your journey is amazing, and it's not been a short one. But like you said, now look at you standing for hours and hours a day with no pain, right? It shows you it can be done. And again, you're getting older. Everyone's getting older. Your body's not younger,
um,
and you're having zero symptoms. So
yeah,
it's
yeah.
incredible.
No, it's been I'm kind of thinking what, any ending notes I want to have. There's so much there's this I think anyone who has this story could talk about it for hours and hours and hours and hours. That's the beautiful thing about it too. But just you know, I think one thing I guess I can say is like we don't with anything in life, but like especially this, you don't have the liberty, like, and again, kind of going back maybe to the faith and spiritual side of it, like we do not have the liberty of knowing exactly when things will shift for ourselves. You don't have control over that. And again, that's like a beautiful, frustrating, humbling thing you learn, but you do have influence. And I guess never quit owning the fact that you never quit influencing what you feel, how you feel it, how much you feel it. And so, yeah, just
Yeah,
don't
I think,
stop.
yeah, I
Cliche
was
is
going
like,
to say the message is don't give up, don't stop, continue on. And like, here's the thing, like when I'm here listening to your story and other
mm,
people too, when you started getting better, really towards the end, you disconnected completely from having an attachment to those symptoms anymore, where you're like, oh, you stop worrying if they're going to go away tomorrow. Oh, I need to focus on them. I need to, you said, I don't care anymore. I'm going to go live my life, get back to this. And then it starts to fade out, right? It's on its own time and its own timeline.
well, because it got, again, circling back before we end this, it crowded, and it was not because it started with a choice, but ultimately it was not because I just made the choice not thinking about it, to not think about it. It's because I crowded it out, because it was finally fully crowded out with something that gave me purpose, gave me community, and built my self-esteem in a way that had nothing to do, ultimately had nothing, or was not dependent on exactly how my body felt in every moment. And that's, you know,
That's it. And just comes to mind of talking to a client recently, like this week, that she had a similar story about her old back pain that she had for 5 years. And she actually said she saw Dr. Sarno back when he was alive, but she
wow.
said she wasn't ready to deal with it in that way. And her MRIs and X-rays were terrible. And she
Yep.
said, you know what? When I got pregnant, it just started going away. And that just reminds me of the same thing where she had something more purposeful, more meaningful, grabbed her attention fully, and it just quieted down. And she's like, I don't know, it just went away. And I said, well, I think this is what happened.
Yeah, but it took everything before that, though.
It
I
took
think for your
everything
nervous
before that.
system to fully respond to that, it's not that yeah, it was everything for that. And I think one thing, this is a little about nowhere, but I know it helped me when I would listen to these podcasts and thing or these interviews in the past. I would like to add just a little PS really quickly. Like, I also had MRIs done. I also had all the imaging done. I also had a steroid shot in my back done. I had all that done. And they said I had like mild scoliosis and a little bit of a slip disc and all these things. So I don't know if you will leave this in there, but for anybody listening, just know that I'm not somebody that on an image I had a perfect back. Like I also had input that there, was something. Nobody ever told me that there was something wrong, but there were physical things they could see that could be contributing. So I just want to add that like I'm also one of those people that, if I didn't learn about this other side of it, I also could have stayed attached to, well, my MRI said this. So just
Correct.
want to add.
Correct. Yeah, your story is amazing. It's just another brilliant story of you overcoming and doing a lot of different things, a lot of work. But and the message is you kept going, like it doesn't happen overnight. But look, here you are now. We just said off air, like, hey, you crossed to the other side. And when you're there, it looks different now, right? It feels different. It's
Mhm.
just different perception. So
Yeah. Yeah. Of
beautiful, beautiful work. And thank you for coming on, Haley. Really, that was
course. Yeah.
appreciative of you sharing your story. So take care of yourself and we will see you down the road.
Yes. See you. Thank
Okay,
you.
bye.